So I first learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the first time in what I believe was my Perspectives of Psychology course, and ever since I first heard about it, it has really stood out to me as being something that I believed in and something that I can see reflections of how it works in my personal life. And I will hopefully get into that a little more later in this presentation. But to start, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs is an idea in personality psychology that is represented by a literal hierarchy or pyramid um, that orders our psychological and physiological needs in a hierarchical fashion to say that um, as people, in this humanistic idea of psychology and personality studies, move towards achieving self-actualization, in order to really be able to pull out our fullest potential, that is the last step on the hierarchy, and the lower levels are all other important needs of different varying degrees that we need to take care of before we can really focus our mental energy on self-actualization, which, according to Maslow and the humanistic psychologist, should be our ultimate goal. Now, self-actualization means essentially it's the idea of really reaching your fullest potential. Um, and, this includes things like really tapping into um, your creative mind, and just basically being the best person that you can be, working at your utmost level. It's kind of in form of enlightenment to some degree, that you are on top of your stuff, you really understand yourself, uh, you have very good control over your thoughts and your spirit to a certain degree. And when you are self-actualized, you are the best that you can be, and you're really in control of yourself, and your life is good, and you're living at your fullest potential. Because, humanistic psychologists believe that everybody is inherently very good, and the things that we experience in our lives will affect whether or not we can reach the great potential that they believe sits inside everybody. And when you are self-actualized, that means that you have hit that peak level of being well-adjusted and understanding yourself, and really tapping into your full potential as a person, whatever that may be. It can be different for everybody. So the levels of the hierarchy I kind of talked about. The top level is self-actualization. Every level below that is a tiered system of needs that start at the very bottom with your very basic and important physiological needs. You need to be fed. You need to have water accessible to you. You need to, be safe and rested, and these are needs that need to be satisfied very often. And if you were not have a reliable source of food and water, you would not be able to be a self-actualized person who can spend the appropriate amount of energy on creative avenues and on, contributing everything that you have to contribute to the world, because you are looking for ways to find food and water. That will always be the highest priority because it keeps you alive. So once you are somebody who has a consistent supply of food, the consistent supply of water, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. The next level up is still a pretty similar level of basic needs, and that is just safety and security, and having a home and a shelter. And it's not something that you need every day like you do food and water, but you need it pretty often, and you still need to have it um, in order to really be thriving as a person. And if you don't have it, it's most likely that your energy and your priority is going to be on satisfying that safety need, and it's not going to be on accomplishing things or being the best person that you can be. So let's say that you've got your bottom two levels covered. You got your food and your water, and you got your shelter. Maslow believes that the next thing that we look for is really just a sense of belonging, being able to relate to other people, and this is where important friendships come in and intimate relationships. And I think this is the point where, for some people, they could disagree that love and belonging really enters at this stage in the hierarchy. Because there are lots of people who, I think, especially now, talk about putting their careers first and working and their work and trying to accomplish things being more important to them than relationships or close friendships or their love life, and they will spend that time pursuing personal goals and career goals and stuff before pursuing those other things. And I think that today, in our modern world, you could probably argue that there are many people who could view these middle to upper hierarchies as being kind of interchangeable or lived out in a different order. But for me personally, I really respect the integrity of the hierarchy in the way that it was constructed by Maslow. Like I said earlier, ever since I've learned about this, I thought it was something that applied really neatly to my life and my experiences. Just to say, when I was 18, I did college for the first time, and I wasn't successful, despite always having been a good student a great student in high school. Not really struggling with schoolwork or anything like that, but really struggling with social interactions and just fitting in and feeling like I belonged, and really getting the right relationships in my life for me, be that with family or friends or significant others. For a long time, I had a really hard time as a young adult focusing on what I could accomplish as a student or as a worker, because so much of my energy, I guess, was dedicated to being in the wrong relationships, or not having the right friends in my life. And when I really started to turn around those things, and I found my way into some closer and better friendships, and I found my way out of some really toxic relationships and into a really fantastic one, I was then, less sad and less stressed out and less just kind of suffering, that bummed out suffering that I think a lot of young adults go through these days, that manifests in different people in different ways. And for me, it was really hard stage to go through. And once I was able to work out of that, and this was before I even knew about the hierarchy, but I found that once I got past that stage, that was when I was able to look at life and think about, what do I want out of my life? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? And what is important to me? And that didn't come from me until I was secure, in my food and my water, my safety and security, and in my friendships, my intimate relationships, and just my overall sense of love and belonging. So I agree with it being written the way it is, which is to say, because I haven't even transitioned into this yet, that after belongings and love needs, the next are esteem needs, which are, chasing after prestige and feeling accomplished and Um, for me, that's thinking like, all right, what do I want to do? I want to finish school. I think that will be something that's good for me. I'm going to go after that. That's an esteem need. What do I want to do? What do I think is a worthwhile career to pursue? Going after that. If you accomplish that, that is an esteem need, and it'll be something that when you get through with it, you'll really feel accomplished. And then that is the last level before self-actualization. Because again, the idea is that once everything else at the hierarchy is satisfied, you can work on self-actualization and reaching your maximum potential. And the way that movement in the hierarchy works, I feel like I talked about it to a pretty serious degree already, but you move up when the lower levels are satisfied, and you can move down if it becomes necessary, because even if you are this person who was doing great for a while and you've started working on self-actualizing, and then all of a sudden your situation changes drastically and you don't have food and water anymore, that's going to become priority number one in your life. You're not going to be able to think about like, oh, this great art project or this book I'm writing or this thing that I'm doing that is what I feel is the best of me I'm putting into. That isn't important anymore when you can't feed yourself. Feeding yourself becomes more important. And that's, movement on the hierarchy works as conditions become satisfied or unsatisfied. What else do we have to talk about? So in comparing Maslow's theory to the other motivational theories, this was interesting because, the concepts of needs and motives, I think, relate really well to the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy, in that that need for food and shelter and stuff creates this motive where that's where your energy goes. That's what you're going to seek out. You're going to try to fix that problem if that's a problem. And I think that area relates really well. And I also think the idea that there are external forces pressing on you that comes from the motivation theory went well with a lot of what we read about in the humanistic theories about, this idea that, we want to have free will and something that things have different value to us when we feel like we're forced to have to do them, which doesn't match up precisely with the motivation theories, but it's, the concept of outside forces exists, though, in different perspectives on both sides. But to me, I thought that the hierarchy of needs represents more of a big picture thing, whereas I think motivation theory is a little more fluid, and that's not to say the hierarchy isn't more fluid. But I guess it's just kind of like zoomed into everything as individual motives, whereas the hierarchy is kind of looping things together as, well, here are your physiological needs, and then that's covered. Here's your psychological needs, and then that's covered. Here is you self-actualizing, without breaking down every situation as individual motives. They're kind of looped into a category. Some of the criticisms of Maslow's hierarchy, valid scientific criticisms, it's hard to measure. It's really hard to gather data on self-actualization because everybody can be different. And self-actualization can be very different for every single person. So how do you really measure that? And, the book said they've done some good work on it, but I would say inherently you can't. And something I really enjoy about psychology and some of these aspects of this personality class has been that sometimes it's not hard science, and we still understand and appreciate that in psychology things can be extremely valid without being scientifically perfect. Other people question the inherent goodness of people that exists in the humanist concepts, which include Maslow's hierarchy under that umbrella, and I think that's a good point. But it's one of those things where it's hard to prove or disprove, right? Because even all the bad people in the world, there are many factors in their life that bring them to that, and just because they're bad people, that doesn't mean that everyone's not inherently good. It just means that sometimes the circumstances are that severe. Um, if everyone was self-actualized, it could lead to chaos because people's self-actualized motivations could overlap. Um, yeah, I mean that's true, but again, just because society would struggle to deal with everyone being self-actualized, just because society is not really capable of handling this theory executed perfectly, it doesn't mean that it's any less true. Yeah, maybe that is the case, that if everybody was self-actualized, it would be problematic, but that would still mean that everyone was self-actualized. It would still give credence to the theory. And some people don't believe in free will at all, which is important um, for most of these humanistic approaches. And I know that there is some very interesting research and discourse out there on the validity of free will, but I'm going to exercise my free will and ignore that. And it's not even a road that I want to go down, thinking about everything being predetermined. And I know some people really dig that, but it's just not for me. Um, I really like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that that's clear from this presentation. And I hope it also gives you a sense of why this is something that resonates so deeply with me in my life, um, and something I've cared about since the first day I studied it. Um, Again, something I've said a lot throughout this course, just to ramble on here for a couple minutes, summing this up, even though I'm already over on time. Um, I think that everybody experiences things very uniquely and individually, and just because Maslow's hierarchy is very true for my life, that doesn't mean it's going to be true for everybody. I think the great thing about this personality course that we've taken is that we've gotten all these different perspectives, and I think that they can all be very valid in their own way for certain people, and we shouldn't be looking to necessarily bridge the gaps between these different perspectives all the time, though it is a good thing to look into. We should be accepting the fact that because people are so vastly unique and different and human, that what is true for some subsets might not be true for everybody, and that's just the way it's going to always be. Um, Thank you for listening. I hope that this was a fun and informative presentation.